findability. So I think you'll find that there's quite an interesting intersection there. I'm going to be talking about how IA and VUI are made for each other. I'm going to go through some simple kind of VUI Design 101 things about how to build a good VUI, and then some best practices for shaping that VUI into something that is logical and concise. So first of all, I am not an expert. I happen to work for a really cool company that has a course on VUI design, and it's something that I've also been really interested in the past year. So I'll be happy to answer questions at the end, but I am not an expert, so hopefully I can do my best there. What I'm going to focus on today is creating great IA for something like an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, just because that's what dominates the VUI market today, and there's no screens involved, so it's kind of pure voice, so it's simpler and easier to understand. So that's kind of what we'll work with today. So IA and VUI. I think that IA and VUI really do belong together, because voice UIs are right now, they're in their infancy. And because not much has been said about these organizations of systems, I think it's really exciting time for an information architect to get in here, and they are set up to become an expert in this field, because not a lot's been said. So I don't know if you guys are practicing information architects. I'm not. I'm a UX designer. That's part of my job. Sometimes it's on a project basis, but it should be something that I'm thinking about every single day. So I'm excited to learn some of the things today. But I think I figured why not start with a little bit of a refresher. I'm sure someone else has done this already. But before I started this presentation, I gave myself a really solid refresher in information architecture. And I have a theory that you can't really understand something until you search it on Google and only search it on images. So I did that. I think a lot of you probably read this book. This is pretty standard. It's kind of the Bible of information architecture. Then you'll start to see cute little Venn diagrams like that. I think these kind of start to get at what information architecture is. I was really excited to see a Career Foundry graphic pop up when I searched for it. This is from an article we have on Beginner's Guide to Information Architecture. There's tons of these little stock photos. They're always writing on glass ceiling things. I don't understand that. I hope the bills are easy to clean. And then, of course, there's these diagrams, tons and tons. I think 90% of the Google search images is diagrams like this. And then this one, which I found really interesting. You probably won't be able to see it from here, but it says Post-Web Information Systems Design. There's an experience designer, an information designer, customer relationship manager holding the tail, an information architect steadying the beast, and then interaction designer and some other people. I don't know who made that, but it really fascinated me. So this is how good old O'Reilly book defines it. So it's the structural design of shared, well, they give 3 definitions, by the way. I think actually 4, but the 4th one's kind of just about the community. But they say that it's the structural design of shared information environments, the synthesis of organization, labeling, search, and navigation systems within digital, physical, cross-channel systems, the art and science of shaping information products, and experiences to support usability, findability, and understanding. So I think it's pretty easy to see how voice user interfaces fit into this, for me, that is. And then hopefully later, I think you'll see that the UI design feels like a very pure IA challenge. But for me, I think that the way I think about it is that it's all about ease of use through planned structure. Information architects aim to make your product as clear and concise as possible. And this means that you always know where you are, you're always a few taps from where you want to be, and this structure is optimized to accommodate you as well as others. So that's what I think of when I think of good information architecture. Well, how do you structure a voice experience? Because what's the artifact there? There's nothing visible happening when you're talking to something like the Google Home. So how's the structure visualized? How would an information architect structure something that's like a conversation? Well, in VUI design, the structure is a user flow for voice. So I'm sure many of you have seen user flows, but this is kind of the main blueprint when you're designing a VUI experience. So you can think of voice user flows as blueprints for conversational experiences. And the blueprint is one of the most important things that you create, and you also use it to ultimately hand off to a developer, and you use it to structure, you use it to organize. So if you're an information architect, you're going to be very interested in this artifact. So I know that's not the most exciting thing to look at, especially on a slide presentation. So I thought I would show something a little bit more advanced than this. How many of you watch Westworld? Okay,
You
so
were the old one.
yeah, the first 2 seasons is all I've seen, but the new sci-fi one, yeah. I don't want to spoil anything for you, so I figured more of you would have seen it, so I'll try very carefully not to spoil anything. But there's a moment in the show that I want to show you guys right now. And when I first watched this show, this is one of the things that kind of just stuck in my head, rotating, that was just kind of a really cool thing that they showed on like a little tablet. And then as I got more interested in DUI, I came back to it and thought, well, that's really funny because that's kind of the future. So this is a little dialogue tree, as they call it in the show. I don't know if you can see in the text there, but it really caught my attention because this is when one of the main AI characters realizes that her responses are already mapped out. Sorry if that's a spoiler. So as she's talking, the technician is holding this, and it's mapping out what she says. I don't know if audio is going to work, but not a huge part of the audio. So she's the AI, and as she's talking, it's a user flow for her voice, and it's mapping out the conversation. So as you can see from this little diagram, it has the potential to do some pretty complex and amazing things. In a second, I'm going to go into a little more detail about this flowchart, so that hopefully it will start to look something like this to you. But today, VUI design is in a pretty primitive state, so don't go thinking that we're at Westworld levels. I think we're about a decade or more from complex interactions like Westworld. Most of the things that you did, most of the experiences in VUI are going to be one-turn interactions. So it's just more like command and control. You speak to the system responds to you. It doesn't remember what you said. It doesn't do anything other than basically what a text field would do, maybe the old school, or the Google search UI, where you just type something into the field and it responds. So it's pretty similar to that. I have an Echo Dot, and I feel like some days it's pretty useless. It's very shallow, but I think that the future looks very, very bright for VUIs, mainly because of the amount of money being thrown at them by some of the biggest tech companies in the world. So all the big tech companies are building these out. So it's mainly through the smart assistant market that the VUIs are getting the most work done with them right now. So they're building these smart platforms, and they're solving UX problems right now, and they're getting better and better. So the architecture behind them is getting more and more complex the longer that these systems are out. And smart assistant companies, they claim that their speech recognition their software is now at 5.5%, and humans are around 5.1%. So slowly, the tech is catching up to humans. And I think that this one thing right here also explains why you've seen a lot of advances in VUI, because I know when I was 10, we had a Dragon Talk on my compact stereo, and it said it could talk to type text, but it didn't work at all. And now I've seen that there's a study done, I think it was by Yale. They were testing how fast it was to type something tap something on your phone, so you're tapping with your thumbs, versus a system that reads what you're saying. And it's 3 times faster to get text from dictating through speech recognition today. So I think you're going to see that time saver is going to make it pretty popular. But this is kind of how VUI works today. So if you took a course like ours, you'd probably start to design a skill, which would be something like this app here. It would be built on the Alexa software platform, which has tons of information architecture of its own, and then you'd access it on the device. So most of them, when you think of VUIs, I think you tend to look at these things and see, oh, that's the VUI, that's the physical thing. But it's a cloud-powered, platform that has some sort of user experience built on top of it. So that's kind of how it works today. And I think you can get away with some messy user flows if your skill is just checking a movie time, or maybe you want to find out a football score. You don't necessarily have to have the cleanest, most concise, organized user flows. But you are going to be relying on a solid IA that's already built into IA in these AI platforms. Good God. There's solid information architecture built into these already, so you take advantage of that. But in a similar manner, if you were building a cabin in the woods, you probably wouldn't need a detailed blueprint. You might not need a blueprint at all. You might just look at a picture, or you might just use your 5-year-old experience playing with logs. And you might make some sketches, some measurements, and then you'd start building. But as you build more complex things, I think that you're going to need a much more organized plan and something that provides structure to the experience. I don't think any of you could imagine building something like this without a very detailed blueprint and some sort of AutoCAD software and some 3D mapping things as well. But also, voice by its very nature is complex. So you can tell lots of things about my voice right now. If this was just a text message, you wouldn't be able to tell near the amount of things you can tell. You can tell things like age, gender, regional background, personality, current emotional state. Maybe you can tell that I'm in my 30s, that I'm a male, that I'm from Texas. Probably not, I don't know if you can tell that or not. That maybe I'm a little bit nervous, and that I stayed up way too late last night finishing this presentation. So those are the kind of things that maybe you can tell from a voice. Yeah, sorry, I had to put one Texas slide in there. I did another presentation just about the future of VUI and why I think it's going to be an important thing. And I made these slides. They're kind of like fake Google ads. For the Google Home makes these ads, and I made 6 of them, so I can share those later if you want to see them. But this is the kind of thing that potentially could happen in the future. So maybe there's a voice user flow. So even the flow itself would be adapting to the tone of someone's voice. And if a user flow can change with the mood of the user, I think you're talking about something extremely complex. So we're going to need some organization. And I think one of the main tenets of good information architecture is that you anticipate growth. So I think it makes sense to talk about growth here today, especially for something exciting and new. It's fun to talk about. I can't think of anything that anticipates growth more than a user flow that we just saw from Westworld. I mean, that's where they sort of show that AI engineers human conversational capacity. Adaptive user flows are something I think are super interesting, maybe a decade or more away. But the point is that these flows in the future are going to be very, very complex. And it's not just going to be VUI. So let's talk a little bit more about some user flow VUI design 101 and stop with sci-fi for a bit. So for the presentation, the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about something like a simple skill for an Amazon Alexa, like an alarm skill that you would download, purchase, use with the Amazon Alexa. So we're going to start with an overview flow for the voice experience of setting an alarm. So this is going to be a little bit difficult for you to see, but I tried to zoom in on the parts as much as I could. So if you look at the flows, there's various shapes that represent the user experience. And the flow shows the logic of the system as it relates to the user experience. So this is what you should be able to at a glance see how the VUI is gonna work. And often there's multiple flows like this. So the first shape we encounter is a round rectangle. It's labeled start here, and it's a terminator. It gets placed at the beginning of the flow and sometimes at the end as well. So coming out of the terminator is a line with an arrow. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the way you structure user flows. So this won't be anything new. There's only one arrow coming out of start, and it leads to a diamond. And that's a decision node. Diamonds are universally used to show decisions. I think this is the same no matter what you do. And each diamond will have at least 2 arrows coming out of it for the decision options, or maybe more. And diamonds can be a simple yes-no, or they can show multiple different states. And then arrows coming out of decisions always need to be labeled as they show what the decision choices are. And then for the states, the arrows lead to these different states. Now states are they're separate flows that are minimized to save space. So think of this whole thing is self-contained in a state. So they're often in the form of a user intent as well. That's kind of how they're structured. So you can get a bird's eye view of the 3 states, which here would be set alarm, cancel alarm, or snooze alarm. So they help keep everything clean and contained. And they showcase the fact that there are different states to a flow. So each map states to a different alarm intent. Okay, we're doing okay. We're halfway there. There's going to be a few more explanations, and then you'll have the basics of voice user flows. So these rectangular boxes are usually used to show prompts. And the system asks the user a question, like in here it says what time. So note how the prompt box has an arrow coming out of it that loops back to the decision of time given. So this little loop here. This is because once the user answers the question what time, the system needs to make sure that the user has given a valid answer. And if the user did give a time, the what time decision now passes with a yes, and they get to move on. So if they say yes, they get to go down. But if the system answers with a no, the user is again prompted with what time. And that's a loop. And oftentimes there's limits to how many loops you can go through a system, because it's really annoying if Alexa's just saying, what time? What time? What time? So that's something you have to think about, is the loops there. And then for system actions, so on the back end here, let's assume that the user has given an appropriate time that we can work with, and the decision answer is yes. So the arrow leads to a parallelogram. And the system action is when the system takes an action on the back end without necessarily requiring input from the user. It's very important to include these because I think this is an easy one to just assume is there. And I think this is also really important when you're doing